Now, Nigeria's new Education Minister Olatunji Alausa highlighted the urgent need to address the country's alarming number of out-of-school children, which he described as a threat to the nation's sustainability. He outlined plans to tackle this issue, including working with the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to provide conditional cash transfers to mothers and also setting monthly enrollment targets. Additionally, the government plans to invest in vocational education, enhancing technical colleges, offering stipends for students, and partnering with the private sector to create job opportunities. Now, with these ambitious plans in place, how confident are we that these initiatives will significantly reduce the number of out-of-school children and address the skills gap in Nigeria? Now, joining us to speak more on this, we have three guests. First of all, we have a studio guest, Mr. Nnamdi Felix-Unachukwu. He's an entrepreneur coach. He's live in the studio with us. And we also have joining us via Zoom, we have Dr. Joy Isa, education consultant and president, Isa School of Education in Lagos, Nigeria, and also Comfort Daniel, psychologist, education advocate, and UNICEF Nigeria Young Influencer, also in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much, gentleman and lady, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Dashin. Thank you for having us, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
All right, so I'm not sure if the ladies actually heard me, but thank you so much for joining us once again. Okay, now let me begin with our studio guest, Mr. Unachukwu. Now, Nigeria has over 20 million of out-of-school children. Let's start with that. This is quite alarming, if you ask me. What do you think is the main reason for this, and what can be done immediately to fix this?
Thank you for that question, Dashin, and I will say that it's so unfortunate that we are hearing such alarming number coming from international organizations telling us that we have such 20.4, 20.2 million out-of-school children is worrisome. It's not something that started today or with the current administration. It's been decades of the rot in the system. And like you asked me, what should we do about it? How do we contain it? How do we regress it? That should be the major thing that should be on the table of the Honorable Minister, Dr. Alausa. If I'm to be his consultant, it's a lot of, it's a big shoe for him, but he has to start somewhere. He has to be very strategic. Now, the only thing we need to do now is we have seen it's a big issue. We have to declare emergency on that right away and be very intentional about approach. For me, I would suggest that you go consult with the whole stakeholders, religious leaders, traditional rulers, and parents. We need to get the parents, get their buy-in, because something that has happened over time, and find out why they choose not to bring their children to school, because it has to come from parents. This whole buy-in, like I said, can start from a community. Not just to give them food, because the children, they love to play. When I was young, most of us didn't want to go to school, wanted to be around our parents. But our parents will compel us and take us to school. So the stakeholders here are required to do something very urgent.
But so many ministers, before him have actually come and gone. So who is to say that his term or his tenure would be different?
Definitely. This is a man coming from... I would say from the little I know about what I read about him, he's coming from the West. He knows the value of education. 20 million is like the size of many nations in the world. In Europe, there are nations that are below 10 million. And you're talking about 20 million. It should be a concern, because if you have 20 million children in the next 10 years, they're going to be very problematic to this country. They will cause a lot of socio-economic a problem to Nigeria, and all these festivities, all these hostilities we have around, is as a result of lack of education. The children are not caught short, and they're taken to the street to cause mayhem and to cause all the kidnapping you're hearing about. So we have to look at it from every perspective. Why the military are using the kinetics to contain what we have today as a crisis. We should look at the long term. What happens in the next 10 years? when all these children that are out of school will grow to be wide. So right now we have to look at it from a right angle to begin to contain it.
Okay, now let's ask the same question to Dr. Joy Isa. Dr. Joy, if you can hear me, speak to us on what you think are the main reasons behind, the 20 million out-of-school children, and what can be done to fix it immediately.
Thank you so much for having me. There are many reasons why children don't go to school, primarily because the parents need them to support work at home. In different areas in Nigeria, we know that labor is expensive. And so instead of a family sending children to school or a relative from somewhere else, the relative is deployed to the house to work. That money, the money the child earns, is sent back to the village for the parents to live off of. We have so many children who are caring for aged parents. We have internally displaced families because of the insurgency, like the coach said. And so these are just a few of the reasons. But at the crux of it really is the value that seems to be missing from the education that the children are getting. Parents, a few parents, or I should say a number actually, because the number is intense, a number of parents are no longer seeing the value that their children can get from education. They think, oh, I send my child to school for a couple years, the child comes out, can't get a job, is not financially independent, so what was the point of sending the child to school? And so by JSS 3, for example, you see the numbers dip incredibly. The gap in, the dropout rates from Basic 6 and JS 3 are astronomical. So you see parents making this decision, and some of the children are by themselves making the decision. They'd rather go, release songs, become, do something practical to earn immediate income. So I think the government really needs to pay attention to the quality of education. We need to promote the value of literacy, the value of numeracy, the value of being a literate populace. We need to promote that joy of literacy again. Also, I think we need to make the schools a bit more attractional. We cannot assume that everybody understands this value. So how about establishing the feeding programs across board, especially in the rural communities? Children will come to school when they know they're going to get a nice hot meal. For that reason alone, they will come to school, attendance numbers will increase. So, that is just one suggestion I have in response to the astronomical numbers, something that may be small in some communities, where communities can come together and establish a feeding program for their community schools, to pull more children into schools and get them off the streets.
All right, let's hear from Comfort. Now, Comfort, as a young, influencer and also a psychologist, you've heard some of the factors that have been presented by Mr. Unachukwu and Dr. Isa. Do you have a different point of view on this?
Different point of view. I quite agree with what Dr. Joyce said and what Mr. Usman said as well, especially in relation to the female education, right, and those in the conflict-affected areas. I think one thing the government needs to also do is, ensure security. You can't go to school and then you've been hearing, oh, you're going to take people away, people are being kidnapped, the school is being burnt down, and so many other negative news, right? No one gets encouraged with that kind of news to take people to school. So I think the government also needs to really focus their manpower on security, and also just to buttress on what Dr. Joy said in relation to poverty, right? Most of the reasons why we see children, out of school children, and the high rates that we have right now is really because of poverty, right? And that's the fact that parents would not take the children to school knowing that, oh, these children are manpower for me to get, to get money, for us to be able to, provide the basic needs of life, food, shelter, and clothing. So while I think that, okay, yes, the government, the new measures being put in place is key as well, right? They also need to ensure that, yes, these children are being fed. I remember reading a news about an NGO saying that, students go to school and then they're hungry, and like she said, the school feeding program, it's a very great suggestion that I would also, I would also just like to give my voice to that. Feeding these children in school and, caring for them, knowing that also including healthcare services would really take a whole lot of burden off the parents, knowing that, when their children go to school, they are fed, their school fees is free, and the school is actually well equipped, right, to take care of them, because no doubt education can be that footstool for them to leave poverty. So we have too many people living way below the poverty line here in Nigeria. So I think that's one of the reasons why, we have quite a large number of students out of school.
Okay. Now let's come back to you, Dr. Unachukwu. Now, the government has actually suggested conditional cash transfers to mothers to encourage them, to send their kids to school. Now, we know the history of, cash transfers in Nigeria, and it has so many negative reviews. And one of them is that it doesn't go round. Like, not so many people get to, have access to this cash. Do you think that this will work? And, how do you think it could be made more effective?
Well, that suggestion for me as a business person is I would say, dead on arrival. You know why? Those parents you are talking about, or those children you're talking about, are in the hinterlands. They don't have phone. They are not on social media. They're not even reading this news that we hear. They don't even have light. So my suggestion will be for the ministry to be very strategic and maybe set up an action, group or a body that will go and fetch these children right from the farms, take them to school, clean them up, get to pay their school fees, their uniforms, and everything that they will require. That maybe we said out of poverty, the parents are not taking them to school, but take care of the whole thing. Now, if the mother will require maybe transportation to go pick the child from school, that's a different ball game. You can, give her some money so that she can go pick the child from school. But for sending that money to the parents, we've seen a lot of things like that not come through. And I don't think government should waste that time, because anything we want to do now, we have to be very, very intentional and look at the sustainability. If you tell me, I will tell you that it's not sustainable.
Okay. Now, let's hear from Dr. Isa. Do you think that, the conditional cash transfer will work this time around?
I agree that it's dead on arrival. I think it's better to invest that money in feeding programs, invest that money in quality teacher development, so that the teachers are there, their salaries are paid on time, they have the tools, the resources they need to teach these children, to really engage them, so that the children want to come to school, they're happy to come to school. Because when your teacher is hungry and disgruntled, of course the teacher is not going to engage you and deliver quality education. So I think that money will be put to better use if it is deployed into structured feeding programs for the children, structured teacher development, paying teachers' salaries, and resourcing the schools. And like our influencer said, ensuring security so that children will go to school. Because, like we say, everyone enjoys a buffet. So if the whole school provision becomes like a buffet, you enjoy yourself, you have one meal to eat, you're safe, of course you'll go to school every day and no one needs to drag you there. So giving cash, unfortunately, I don't agree with that. I believe it will be better to invest that money deliberately in feeding programs and quality teacher professional development.
All right, now still on you, Dr. Isa. Now, many children in northern Nigeria, especially girls, face so many challenges, from cultural to religious barriers to education. Now, what should be done to change this?
It's difficult to change a culture. It's easier to influence change when it becomes structured. So you cannot change the culture of the people. And I grew up in northern Nigeria, by the way, so I am aware of the culture. And yes, culturally, young girls get married earlier in northern Nigeria. That is the culture. However, we find that the more educated a family is, the more educated the mothers are, the parents are, the later the children are, should I say, married off, the more the parents are interested in educating their girls, because they see that when the girls are educated, they have fewer issues with pregnancy, the children are empowered, it cascades across the family. So unfortunately, we can't change culture. However, this is where we as stakeholders, religious leaders, government professionals need to promote the importance of educating the girl child. I mean, you can't have half your population uneducated. The disparity in numbers between boys and girls is, it's close in range. It's not like an 80-20%. So think about this situation where 50% or almost 50% of your population is disempowered, and we're supposed to be paying attention to socio-economic development across our nation. So we have to educate our girls so that they're safer, they're healthier, and they can promote, better well-being across our communities.
Okay. Now, Comfort, now still speaking on educating the girl child, you've heard what Dr. Issa has actually said about, what's going on in the north and, how it is difficult, or the girls are facing so many challenges when it comes to, education. What can be done? What can local communities or even young people, young ladies especially, who have benefited from the four walls of the school do to be able to, buffer this particular challenge?
Question. I would say that, like you mentioned earlier, cultural beliefs is cultural barriers, right, and religion barriers is one of the reasons why we have young girls not going to school. So I think one thing the government and every young person can do is we need to go to the grassroots level and collaborate with these ones. There's no doubt how much influence our culture and religion holds for us here in Nigeria, especially. Right. So when you work with them, you make them see and understand how important education is. It's easier to influence the community, right? And even thereby creating support groups that advocate and ensure that these ladies actually have access to education, right? And I think another thing needs to be the government, like what Dr. Issa said, creating a safe environment for the students, the girl child in school. How supportive and safe is the school environment for them is very key that the government even looks at this. So I think advocating for that and engaging with the community, especially those at the grassroots. The speaker earlier said that they don't have access to their phones, they don't have access to social media like we do. Right. So we need to go to the grassroots level, especially, and engage with them. Let them see and hear what we are saying. It's easier that way to influence, especially when it comes from voices they already believe and respect, which are their cultural leaders and religious leaders as well.
Apologies, Mr. Unachukwu, I sidelined you, on the girl child thing, but you can still speak on it, if you want to. But then, still talking about, girl child, I believe that if education reaches the rural community, then the girl child will definitely, get to, learn from, education and also have an opportunity. So how do you think education can be made more accessible for rural communities?
Yeah.
Because earlier, Dr. Joy Issa actually talked about how, since people are hungry, how the school feeding program can be, used to actually influence or even make these people want to come to school.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with her. And let me pick it from what Dr. Issa said about the kind of education we're talking about. How functional is that education? If a child goes to school and the parents know that by the time the child is getting to maybe the basic school, basic primary, coming from maybe JSS 3, that child would have learned one trade or the other, one skill or the other. that he can monetize and be able to help his family. I'm sure many parents will encourage their children to go to school. Why they are pulling them out, they feel we need you because we don't have a lot of money. We have many children, well, maybe we have 7. We need 2, 3, 4 to go to the farm and do this and do that and learn how to farm and learn how one skill or the other. But if we can now bring those schools to formal education and integrate it better, retrain the teachers on how to train the young minds. At that age 7, 8, between that bracket of 7 to 11 or 12 or 13, you see that those children would have grabbed one skill or the other. Like the former minister that just left talked about a child coming out with 2 skills upon graduating at just junior secondary.
I heard they've started teaching entrepreneur as a course as well, entrepreneurship in universities. So.
Yeah, universities, but that's not where to catch. You need to catch them young. Okay. But by the time, let me defend that, by the time a child is getting to university, he has formed a mindset, and that mindset is how to make it big and how to get the job or how to even japa. But if you want a child, to grow entrepreneurial mindset, you need to start early to build that mindset in the child. So that child will now develop that self-efficacy and self-sustenance, believing that he can do it. So the child grows into it, and that's how he becomes an entrepreneur, a problem solver, innovative and creative. But if you allow that child to pass certain age, at that age, a lot of things, cultural, social, peer pressure, a lot of things would have made that child to form an opinion about life and wouldn't want to go back to entrepreneurship to learn anything. They will all be looking for something high there. So let me come back to what I was saying. Let's make this education more functional and attractive. If you get to school and you're teaching a child how to do tiling from primary school, how to do painting from primary school, how to do fish farming from primary school, and it's hands-on, I'm sure many parents want to bring their children to learn because they know that once that child is coming from there, that child is, going to implement it and begin to make money.
I think they have to make it practical first because it's more theoretical than practical in schools.
That's the problem we have with our education, is just theoretical. But if we now say 80-20, 20 in classroom, bring them, that's why I say hands-on, bring them out. A lot of things has to happen. You have to be, the government or the ministry have to be very strategic about building skill hubs in schools, changing their lab to mean, even get the private sectors to come and participate to help build more skill labs in schools so that these children, it will be hands-on and the child going there knowing that he's going to learn something that he can now monetize and begin to make money at that young age. Many parents want to put their children to go and learn. It's free.
Well, you did talk about, farming and skills to actually come out with, and the government plans to update the school curriculum for the 21st century to include these skills. But let's hear from Dr. Joy, what you think about this, how this curriculum can be made more relevant, for the 21st century and also, to the real world skills like problem solving and also critical thinking.
So the former minister introduced, let's call them 15 skill acquisition courses across the curriculum. And I remember when the review was published, I wondered how the teachers would transition, for example, from being a science teacher, trained to teach, everything science, basic science, to now saying, oh, you can do science. So, you can just teach them how to do plumbing. They just give them the textbook and they know what to do. Dr. Nnamdi has said we need to make the curriculum practical. But I want to go back as a practitioner in the space. Currently, in a number of our schools, children learn PE in a classroom using a textbook. Nobody internationally learns PE in a classroom using a textbook. You go on the field and you swim, you run, you do your throwing, catching skills. It's all practical. Children are learning ICT. I'm on the APEN advocacy group, and we're trying to reform one of the public schools in Lagos. And we went to visit the school. The children are learning about computers without a computer in the so-called computer lab. How can we suddenly jump to begin to teach auto mechanics, ICT and coding, the leap is not realistic. Can we focus on core literacy, numeracy, critical thinking skills? Can we use the resources we have to empower our children to think so that by themselves they can begin to innovate, to creatively solve the problems around them? And that then extends to other subject areas. So it's okay to extend the curriculum, but the challenge is the teachers need retraining. First off, the teachers don't even have enough training as they are. How then do you expect them to all of a sudden begin to teach? I mean, I saw that and I'm thinking carpentry, plumbing, hairstyling.
And
These
most
are
of
things
these
that can be
teachers
done
are not
as
teaching out of
clubs.
passion. They're teaching because
Thank
they're
you.
hungry.
These are things that can be done as extracurricular activities embedded in the curriculum, absolutely. But you need professionals. So you don't want a plumber who used to be a science teacher, but now, you don't want someone messing up with your plumbing. That's a big deal. So first off, maybe perhaps I wanted to study medicine and jam happened to me, as the young people say. Meanwhile, they wrote the exam, right? But jam happened to them, and they ended up studying maths education, and they ended up being a teacher, a maths teacher. So they're not as enthusiastic and as passionate, and they're not able to engender the love of mathematics or digital or computation among the children. How is that teacher then supposed to now transition to becoming the ICT or auto mechanics teacher? So I think we need to dial things down, dial back. What are we doing for initial teacher training? What are we doing for the teachers now? How can we help them, motivate them, inspire them to do a good job of what they're doing so that the quality of the education that our young people are receiving, the quality of the education that they're receiving improves? That quality needs to go up, and then we can enrich. But you cannot enrich something that is defective. So we need to fix what we have before we expand and extend to enrichment. One last thing I want to say is public-private partnership. Dr. Nnamdi said it. We need the telcos, for example, to host labs in the different schools. Imagine if any of the telcos has a digital hub or a lab in 3 or 4 public schools in gateway cities or in bigger rural communities, and the children can go there after school and they learn the GSM repairs they're supposed to learn, they learn electrical connections, they learn things, and that lab is sponsored and funded by the telco as part of their CSR. That reduces the weight on the government, because the government alone cannot fund educational reform. We need public-private partnerships so that our children as a whole, our young people that form 50% of our country, can have the education that they need to make a difference.
Okay. Now, let me pass the same question to Comfort. Now, Comfort, go ahead and speak to us on, the school curriculum and how, you feel that this curriculum could be made or encouraged to to encourage critical thinking.
All right. So I like what Dr. Isa actually said. I'm going to say the bedrock of every school of education, the education system actually lies in the hands of our teachers. And if you are going to make changes to this curriculum, if you are going to improve the curriculum, it's not going to be effective when the people delivering these things aren't prepared for it, right? So look, the government need to focus more on training these teachers, right? And when we talk about even the schools, are the schools ready to teach such, are they ready to teach such curriculum, topics and many more, right? Do they have the tools? Do they have the resources? Talking about, we want to, involve STEM in education. How many teachers actually are experienced? That is, how many of them have the knowledge, right? And even, I think Dr. Nnamdi mentioned passion, right? So our teachers are not even well taken care of. So delivering this thing with passion for you to move, education from rote learning, from traditional learning to actually being more student-centered, to teaching them, to ensuring that these students are impacted, right? And you're moving more from, oh, let me stop teaching theoretically to saying, okay, let's move more to be more practical, having group problems, group sessions where you have problems to solve, and many more. To do this, we need to ensure that these teachers actually have the skills, right? And Dr. Issa also mentioned, which I would love to say, is the private and public partnership, where we involve international donors, we involve private sectors here in Nigeria as well. Because involving these people, like she said, the government can't really do anything, and education needs funding a whole lot, right? And so when we have companies, tech industries, or industry experts being involved in developing this curriculum and training our teachers, it makes education more impactful. It makes it be more student focused, student centered. And then we know that, okay, now our students are are growing, our students are being impacted through the education system, and our education system is no longer just the usual way it was, where it was just theory based. But now our students have the critical skills they need, the problem solving skills they need to go into the world and do amazing things. And even for global best practices, international donors will be key in helping our teachers, schools, and even the government at large understand what are the best practices, what's working for other countries, what can we implement here, what do we need to make changes to suit our own environment that can also impact our students and children.
Okay. Now, speaking of, what would suit our environment and, practical skills, it seems everything in our society is being politicized at the moment. And, the minister emphasized on civic education as well. So how is this supposed to help, unite the country, and how can this be practically taught?
Okay, before I go to talk about the
civic
proposal
education.
on civic education, let me also lend my voice on what Dr. Issa said about implementing the new curriculum as have been endorsed by the National Council on Education. It took the NERGC a lot of work to organize this new curriculum. Remember that education all over the world evolves. It's only in Nigeria that you have our curriculum very static for decades now, and a lot of us have been clamoring for that change, that it has to happen immediately, where we don't have more people absorbing the students that are coming out from the university. That's why you have the high rate of unemployment. Why don't you create more people that are entrepreneurs, that can create jobs, that can be self-employed? And it has to come from school. Instead of doing it informally, then we can bring it to school, teach them entrepreneurship, teach them skill acquisition and the rest of things. And by the time they are going to university, they already know what they want to be, and they, do more about it, and then come out with the intention to set up a business. And before you know it, we have a lot of job opportunities here and there. Now, let me come back to what the Honorable Minister talked about civic education. I know why he said that is because of so many Nigerians don't like Nigeria. So many people want to run away from Nigeria. So many people want to break down Nigeria. That's why you have a lot of people go into crime, not minding what it has done to the image of the country in terms of fraudsters here and there. That reminds me what New Central did about making sure that you bring down. They brought back 5 Nigerians that were taken to Ghana for fraudulent activities. Kudos to the management of New Central. Thank you for that opportunity to give those children another lifeline to know what to do about that. Now, come back to why the Honorable Minister said that civic education is not only what they can teach in school. It has to go beyond school. The religious leaders need to preach it, the love for the nation, so that we can come together and do more for the nation. The traditional rulers need to preach it, parents need to preach it, and then in school, we're already doing it in social studies and the rest of them, but maybe we need to retrain the teachers. When we talk about implementation, like what they have already now, the new curriculum, what I would suggest to the Ministry of Education is for them to be strategic about implementation now. The past minister said, oh, this has to happen. the new minister has come, then the next job he has on his table is, how do I implement this thing, roll it out, because they've taken the pains to organize all these things, and the whole commissioners came together and said, this is good for the nation. So it's not an implementation. It starts with, training the teachers. They have to reskill. They have to, know what to teach now. And also create that passion in them, like we talked about. If there will be a step up in their remuneration, it has to happen also. And we now look at the publishers, getting the books ready and rolling it out, so that maybe in the next section, maybe by next year, it will be rolled out in all the schools. That's the best thing that can happen to this country, because in the next 20 years, maybe by 2040 or thereabout, we're going to have a lot of things to grapple with. We're talking about youth, restiveness and insecurity here and there, because they are idle, they don't have job. So you said, oh, teach them more numeracy, teach them grammar. When they graduate from school, they don't have job. So you need to retrain, you need to change. That's what the 21st century education is talking about. How do you teach these children so they start making money right away without wasting time? And when they are busy, I don't think they will want to carry on. When they are busy, they want to grow their businesses. And that's where I will chip in my own advice, saying that the ministry should not jettison that one that have been crafted and ready, the new curriculum, because it took them a lot of pains to work it out. But let there be implementation, and let there be sustainability when it is implemented. Yeah. So that's what I would suggest.
Absolutely. Now, with that, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, the conversation continues. Do stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. You're still watching The Conversation, and we're talking about the education system, in Nigeria and the upgrades that it will be having soon. We've had three guests. We've had Mr. Nnamdi Felix-Unachukwu with us in the studio. We've also had Dr. Joy Isa and Comfort Daniel, joining us via Zoom to speak to us on this. Now, while we're still, speaking, while we went on the break, I actually wanted to ask Dr. Isa. Dr. Isa, Comfort earlier talked about STEM, and we know that the government wants to focus on, STEM. For those who have no idea what STEM is, it means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, how can we ensure that schools are ready for this, especially in terms of, teachers and also resources? You did talk about how teachers need to, be equipped to be able to, focus on teaching well.
I'd like to respond to that question from is something I researched when I was completing my doctorate in curriculum instruction and assessment. WAEC has a dashboard where they publish results and do analysis of student papers, challenges students have with responses. And in the sciences, one of the fundamental challenges that was discovered is that children don't excel as much because they have challenges with English, with literacy. So because they can't spell keywords properly, they don't understand the questions, they're not responding effectively. Every teacher should be a teacher of English, fundamentally. Once your literacy level is adequate, is above average, let's put it that way, then you are able to dive into the more complex nuances of Newton's law and Pythagoras and all the things that have to do with science, engineering, and mathematics. In our initial teacher training programs, are we teaching the teachers how to deliver STEM education? And my response to that is not in 21st century language, let's put it that way. Our initial teacher training, our NCE training, our BSc training, that initial teacher training, it has not necessarily evolved to STEM training. In most of our public universities, it's quite sad, but this is our reality. So school leaders, school owners are having to retrain the teachers they employ so that those teachers can deliver top quality STEM education. There are a couple philanthropic organizations that are partnering with public schools, providing labs providing a bit of training here and there, but we all know that education evolves. Like Mr. Nnamdi said, education evolves. And so you cannot have the initial teacher training I received before I even got to, or right after youth service in 1995, that cannot be the operating system I'm still using till date. We have to evolve, we have to grow. So what are we doing about initial teacher training? We've learned the curriculum has improved. That's all well and good. Who's going to deliver the curriculum? Because the teacher alone has the singular most important factor that impacts children's ability to learn.
And
Second to
reports
the child
actually
themselves.
say that, there aren't enough qualified STEM teachers. I don't know, how true is this?
There aren't. We don't have enough teachers, full stop. UNICEF has published that by 2030, the whole world needs 44 million additional teachers. Sub-Saharan Africa alone needs 15 million teachers if we're to come close to the ratio, I think it's 1 to 35 or so they say. That is the recommendation. We have schools where we have 80, 90, 100 children to one teacher. So we need 15 million teachers. In Nigeria alone, to teach our teeming youth population, which means we have about 110 million young people, where are the teachers? We don't have enough. And so we must invest in mass quality professional development for teachers so that they can get our nation to where we should be to meet our goals.
Okay. Now let's hear from Comfort, still on STEM. You brought this up, earlier. What can be done to train and keep these teachers, especially in remote areas? Dr. Issa did say that, most of the teachers in rural areas don't even understand English. So how are they expected to pass it on to the kids?
Okay, so teachers in rural areas. So I think the first thing is, no doubt we need to train these teachers, right? But then, if we are to be honest, the outlook on the teaching profession here in Nigeria isn't pronounced. There's some sort of, like, say, tagline attached to it, right? And I feel like teachers are underpaid, teachers are not well taken care of. So if we're looking at the rural area teachers, like we said, partnering with industry experts. So when you partner with industry experts to go to these remote areas, rural areas, to develop these children and to develop these teachers, to train them, right, on how to deliver STEM lectures, to teach them. A teacher that is teaching chemistry and doesn't know how to, use the necessary tools or understand the periodic table, or even teach students how to titrate and many more, is going to be unable to even teach them more advanced, chemistry terms, right? And so partnering with these industry experts to go to the rural areas to help these teachers, to teach them, taking these teachers on training, right? External training, internal training. And I don't think the training should just stop. It shouldn't just be one thing, right? It should be continuous. It should be quarterly training. Okay, this local government is organizing this training, another local government is organizing another training, and it keeps going on like that to state level, then federal level training and more, right? And then when we're talking about even this the remote areas, like I mentioned, if we're going to talk about higher pay, then look, because in the remote areas, we're being honest, there's insurgency going on, right? For some, there's lack of efficient transportation. So I think the government focusing on these things is also key for you to have the qualified teachers to even go to those places, and then saying that, you're taking care of them with housing allowance, where do they stay, where do they live, feeding allowance, many more, right? They also have families depending on them. They have things they want to do, right? So paying them well, that would enable qualified teachers to go to that place, train them, organizing trainings for them, which is very key. And the resources, this remote areas, schools in the remote areas. I remember reading an article and it said that a particular school didn't even have a computer, right? And it was just the principal's office that actually had one, right? So in that kind of school, how do you expect students that to even understand basic things like how to use Microsoft Office suites, right? It's going to be really hard to teach them. You probably have started them with the use of textbook, just like Dr. Issa said earlier. So I think going there, providing them these resources and the tools, especially when you want to imbibe STEM curriculum right now, you need to actually provide them these resources, these tools, and ensure that the teachers going there, the teachers over there are well taken care of, because nobody wants to go to a rural area where they're not well taken care of, or know that they're not going to be paid well or provided with, the benefits that comes with teaching. Yes.
All right, now, Mr. Nnamdi, now, before we talk about, poor condition and also limited, learning materials, do you have anything you want to say about STEM, especially when it comes to, tertiary institutions, and how you think the universities can actually work with industries to ensure that STEM graduates actually have skills? Because we all know that there's so many, graduates, from engineering and the likes that right now are into entrepreneurship, especially looking at the structure of our tertiary schools as well, talking about the series of strikes that actually happen in, in a year on its own. Even in New Central, where we work, there's so many engineering students who are who are anchors. So please go ahead.
Okay, let me say that, first of all, my first degree was engineering, electronic engineering. And if we talk about STEM, it's something I want to dive at, because I believe science will help this nation so much. But before I comment on that, let me go back to what Dr. Issa was talking about, training the teachers. If we understand the importance of human capital development and the impact on social economic welfare of a nation, we shouldn't joke with teachers. You see, as an IT person, I know what it means to upgrade, to move from one technology to a higher technology. And you have the teachers who are almost what they do is like what they learned 20 years ago, and they are just so stereotype about it without retraining them. One of the governors one time complained that the teachers were taking on exams, and greater number of them didn't pass in the north. So it is worrisome. I would suggest, because I hate to complain and I hate to criticize. I like bringing up an idea. I would suggest that the ministry should set up a body that will continuously, on a continual basis, retrain the teachers and give them 21st century education, or the format that the rest of the world are using today. What we read in the newspapers will get you worried about what is going on. Not that we don't have this money. The other time, UBEC, the executive secretary of UBEC, if I'm not mistaken, said that they have over 134 billion to be used on school projects. But the countable funds, according to law, that should come from state government, is not coming from the state governors. Over 34 states are not activating these funds. What it means is that if they should bring the 50% that should activate it according to law, we are going to have nothing less than 270 billion naira. I mean, why should that amount sit idle when our teachers are not trained? I mean, we need to do something. We need to be kind of, I'm looking for the right word so I don't make mistake, but to look at it from a better perspective, these politicians, their children are going to good schools. Why should we leave such an amount? It pains me when Mr. Femi Falana was talking about it, that this money has to be activated. It can be enough to train the teachers, and it can be enough to enhance their take-home, and they take care of them, and they will be happy to teach the children. Because what is most important in any nation, is human capital development. When you develop these 20 million people, you know what they will turn into your economy. Yeah. Now, let's come back to STEM. Of course, what you have today, you have a lot of those scientists, those engineers, like you said, who are now
doing something totally
different because they don't have where to work. And that's why I encourage that, why don't we get more entrepreneurs? There are a lot of tech entrepreneurs. If we begin today to teach them on entrepreneurship at young age, 7, 8 to 14, teach them enough of entrepreneurship, and they will build that entrepreneurial mindset, grow up with it. You will see that child as he's coming from school, he's thinking of what to do. When I was coming out of school, I was graduating in engineering. I never wrote anything like, I beg to apply. I set up my own business and I grew it, and that's where I am today, employing labor. So I believe that if we begin from that primary school basic education to teach children entrepreneurship, skill acquisition, and they go with it, they grow with it, we're going to be better off in the next few years to come.
Well, I'm actually having so much fun on the show, and but sadly time is not on our side. But I'll just give Dr. Isa 1 minute to, share her final thoughts.
2 final thoughts. First one, TRC and the Teachers Registration Council is responsible for retraining, upskilling, and recertifying our teachers. However, till date, the CPD, the Continuous Professional Development Programs, are not necessarily made mandatory across board. In public schools, yes, you have to have a certain number of courses before you get promoted. But what is happening in the private schools? We have more private schools across Nigeria than public schools, and that is the truth. So I want to shine the light on the regulation of private schools across the country.
Okay.
The people who should be checking on the standards of these teachers, the quality of the learning, something needs to happen in that space as well. What is the quality of the education being delivered in our private schools? We need to check. We need to pay attention to that. The other thing, Comfort mentioned about the remuneration of our teachers and the fact that, yes, we're at the bottom of the ladder. In fact, my husband says I'm a missionary in the field of education. And it is true because, yes, we are, paid the lowest if you look at the economy. However, we have one of the most difficult, most challenging jobs, and our job is profound because we shape minds. So the entire disposition to education needs to change.
Absolutely.
We should no longer talk down on teachers. I mean, most people, my father literally almost disowned me when I said I wanted to study French and linguistics as my first degree, because he thought, oh, you passed maths, you did this, how can you want to be a poor teacher?
All right, Dr. Isa, we've actually run out of time, and I wish we could actually speak more on this. But thank you so much, gentlemen and ladies, for joining us on the conversation today. I'd like to thank Mr. Nnamdi Felix-Unachukwu, entrepreneur coach, with me in the studio. And we'd also love to thank Dr. Joy Isa, education consultant and president, Isa School of Education, and Comfort Daniel, psychologist, education advocate, and UNICEF Nigeria Young Influencer. We appreciate you, and we absolutely appreciate you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we've come to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for staying tuned. See you next time. I'm Darshan Usman.